Okay, so this is the next episode. I was with Jeff Carlucci in the last episode, and we're doing a part B. He has 5 major leadership lessons that he was talking about from British literature. And we're just going to pick up right where we left off. If you haven't heard the last episode, listen to the last episode, and he's got some great lessons about leadership.
You are listening to The Leadersmith, Darren Gerdes.
All right. Well, Darren, thank you. It's great to be back again. And if it's okay, I'll just jump right in.
Absolutely. Keep going. Actually, let's do a little recap. Okay.
Okay.
So for people that didn't hear the first one, the lesson from Beowulf was about pride. It was
Push away pride.
okay. The second lesson, it was from John Milton.
Yeah. And it was about the fact that he wrote Paradise Lost after going blind, which discouraged him before he wrote it. But because he persevered through, it said the lesson is persevere through obstacles. But because he persevered through, Paradise Lost is probably greater than it would have been if he didn't have the obstacle.
Yeah, that's great. So the obstacle is actually like the Stoics will talk about the obstacle is the way, right? Right. Okay. So we got to work around obstacles. And the third lesson was
from Ulysses by Tennyson. And it was talking about Odysseus who got old. And it's a little bit of a perseverance, but it's a totally different point of view on it, because Odysseus says that we are not what we were when we were younger, but what we are, we are. And he has experience, he has wisdom, he has used to joke about having guile, and when you get older, it's this sense of, I have abilities that I didn't have before, so don't rely on past abilities, recognize new opportunities and abilities, and continue to persevere.
So what's the next one?
So lesson 4 was William Wordsworth, and we read the Lucy poem, She Dwelt Among the Untrodden Ways. And in that he expresses, and it's probably about his sister, it could be about other women that were in his life, a daughter who had passed away, but he's basically saying, few people knew you. You were not famous. You were not powerful, but the impact you had on my life was significant. So we were trying to talk about, as leaders, you cannot dismiss or discount short meetings, interruptions, opportunities to lead. Here at school, we talk about the fact that we're always teaching. When I'm in my classroom, obviously I'm teaching. But when I'm walking down the hall, a little annoyed that I have to go to a meeting, or I bump into a teacher and the students are watching. When I'm coaching the sidelines, the students are watching. I'm always teaching, and leaders are always leading, whether it's in the 2 minutes that you thought you had to yourself to go grab a cup of coffee and somebody stops you. So I think honestly, that may be the most important lesson of the 4 we've talked about, because it's dealing with people, not things. I think you talk about managers versus leaders. You can manage the things, but you have to lead people. And you don't always lead people by standing in front and saying, this is the way it's going to be. A lot of times it's walking beside them and listening to what they have to say.
Yeah. And let me add one more thing to that. And that is, in class, I'll ask, tell me about the best leader that you know and how they've impacted you. And it's never governor so-and-so, president this, CEO that. It's almost never that. It's a parent, a youth pastor, a teacher. It's somebody that like just somebody, a coach, somebody like a normal human being who has really spoken into their life. They took notice. I think back into my own life, and I think about people that have gone out of their way to mentor me, like they didn't have to. When I was late in high school, early into college, I'd come back from college, and my pastor would say, "Hey, Darren, let's go out to lunch." He didn't have to go out of his way to do that, but he did, and he poured into me, and he spent time helping me unpack and think through things.
Yeah.
And man, again, it's not like these huge leadership successes or huge, I changed this, or I put a dent in the universe. No, people are leaders all the time at all kinds of levels. And you'd be amazed at how many people are better off. It really is a wonderful life. How many people are better off because of your existence. So
yeah, That's great. Yeah. I think we discount what we can do by just being a charactered,
Yeah.
talk about having good character as a leader. People see it, people are encouraged by it, and
Mhm.
it is impactful.
And it doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't have to come with
No.
a speech.
Yeah.
It's just living life in a way that is, so you follow that person because you want to live life that way, right?
And I think as a leader, the I have to have all the answers and I need to fix it is a real burden. And it's not one people necessarily want to hear. They hear that you hear them. I remember I was middle school principal and had a teacher come in with a problem and she's going on and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to fix this. And I started to fix it 2 or 3 times. So she finally said, stop. I don't need you to fix it.
Just listen.
Listen to me.
That's right.
Oh, and you know what? That one applies well at home and in almost every area also. Just listen and hear what they're saying. Don't just go through it. And actually, that impacted me a lot because I realized I was listening, trying to come up with my answer to what was being said almost all the time, as opposed to just listening.
Mhm.
And when leaders listen, the people they lead love them. You talk about if you have my back, you'll have my heart. I
That's
think
exactly right.
one of the ways of getting someone's heart, and it's actually it's not manipulative. It's polite. It's proper the way you do things. Just listen, and I think that's a great lesson. There's
Yep. Okay. Number 5.
Number 5. So this one maybe is not as well known. I mean, in literary circles, it's known. Thomas Gray, late 1700s, wrote a poem called Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. Now, the lesson is going to be similar to the one we saw with Wordsworth, but what Thomas Gray does, and it's relatively long, he's walking through a country churchyard. And if you're just thinking it's a churchyard is a cemetery. That's when, back in the day, when people would die, they would bury them in the churchyard. And he sees unmarked mounds of dirt or very, very rude markings. And he begins to wonder what these people were like. What were they? And he surmises they were probably good family, and he's thinking men who were working, because at the time that would be who would be working outside the home. Good family men who were working with the cattle, and then they come home to a warm hearth with a fire in it and loving wife and children. The wife has been caring for the kids and working at home, and that's what they were. But then he begins to think, I wonder if they had the same opportunities that others had. And he talks about John Hampden, who was a freedom fighter. And he talks about Milton, actually, and talks about great musicians and warriors. And I wonder if given the same opportunity, they had the same ability. And he ends up there going through that. So that's one of the points he makes. But at the very end, he thinks, I wonder what people are going to say about me. And then he thinks, I hope they see me being who I am, a poet. So I'm going to pull 2 lessons out from this. The first one is, don't look around and say, oh, well, if I had his stuff, I'd be successful too. Of course, he's got this great. I can't do that. You are automatically, artificially discounting your ability and probably negating the opportunity to be successful because you're thinking it's all in the stuff and the surroundings and not in who you are. And so he is saying these were great men, great people. He actually at one point says, those who were wealthy, don't mock these people. They could have been great. But as a leader, we have such an opportunity. I do it. Man, if I had, the United States men's national team on my soccer team, we'd win everything. No, it's about my ability. And so I think that's one lesson.
So before you go on to the second lesson, can we pause on that?
Yeah, please.
So comparison's the kiss of death.
It is, yeah.
Right? And so when you start to compare to each other, what you're doing is you start to shed responsibility, because if I had this, then I'd be no. You're responsible. You're to steward what you have with and use what you have and make what you have as useful as and profitable as possible. You're not charged with what. Remember, I'm not gay for Don. Right. That's right.
Yeah.
She's not me. And so that's the way that works. So you have to think in terms, because again, if you get into the comparison trap, you weaken yourself.
Yeah.
Like, oh, if only I had. It's kind of like if you're waiting for other people to somehow save you,
Right. Yeah.
right? That's where you get into, like, oh, if they gave me this, then it gives you an excuse, a way out. You stop being responsible. So that's what I take away from that. And I know no world-class leader that can actually that doesn't take full responsibility for themselves.
Wow. Yeah. I love the way you said that when you compare, you're shedding responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. I will steal that you will hear that in my classroom all year.
Help yourself.
Thanks. So the other part that I think is interesting is, as he gets to, I hope that they recognize when I die that I was doing poet things. And he comes up with, brooding by a tree and looking over a brook and all those things. But I saw that as, when we lead, we need to be who we are.
Right.
We talked about earlier that, I think on the previous episode, introverts can be great leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to be the extrovert. Be who you are. So do the things that you are gifted in doing. Surround yourself with good people. You talked about Gay for Don. I had the same experience a couple of years before you got here with Diana Gonzalez, who was the legendary English teacher in the high school. And I tried from the beginning of school to December 12th to be Diana Gonzalez. And I was miserable. She was wonderful. I was miserable. December 12th, I finally said, you know what? I've been doing this at another school for 7 years. I'm just going to do what I do. And life turned around for me. And so be yourself. I mean, I know that's, again, I said earlier on the other episode, some of these are obvious. But if you're not doing them, they can just undermine everything that you're doing as a leader.
And other people have a vested interest in making you not be yourself, right? So
what do you mean by that?
Other people have a vested interest in not making you be yourself. They will pry you out of what you're supposed to be doing and into their mold, and stamp that on you. And as I was hearing you talk, I was thinking about puppet shows in Russia, right? You know the story, right?
Yep.
So, so this was when we were teaching at StoneBridge, and so we're grading papers at Barnes and Noble, as was our custom around exams, midterms or finals. I don't remember which. And we're sitting there doing our whatever. And I had been on a couple of mission trips to Lithuania. So Lithuania is former Soviet Union, and I'd been over there, and I was at a conference in the Samos, that's their parliament, and I was over there. I was teaching teachers how, stuff about how to teach, kind of a principal approach-ish kind of way of things as we do at StoneBridge. And and so you were telling me that Debbie is going on a missions trip to Russia.
Yep.
And then you say what?
They're going to be at an orphanage and doing puppet shows for the orphans, and you should do that.
And I say, nope.
Yeah. And you need to understand, he didn't count you. He didn't say, well, it's good. He looked at me and said, no, I'm not going to do that.
No.
Like, what? It's a good thing.
Nope.
And you said, it's not what I'm supposed to do.
It's not me. And you're miffed, right?
I was.
I remember that day, like you were like cold, like icy from like, who's he thinking, right? But then the next day we had a different conversation. Remember the next day?
No.
The next day you were like, you know what? I was upset with you yesterday, but you're right. You know yourself.
Yeah.
That is not for you. You should not be doing puppet shows at an orphanage. That is not like, I have no strength in doing puppet shows.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I remember.
Just because I had been in another Soviet bloc country on a mission trip does not mean that that's what I should be doing here.
Yeah.
And you congratulated me for knowing yourself, and I thought like, yeah, I appreciate that you see that, but I wasn't trying to be cold or anything, saying
Yeah.
nope. But I didn't have to think about it because I know myself, right? And that's what we were
Yeah.
talking about earlier. So that's what I was thinking about when you were explaining. So,
Yeah.
and even when you went into the poem here, or not the poem, the talking about the background, the context, you're talking
Yeah.
about, I hope that they see me as a poet. I was thinking mentally, I hope they do not see me as a poet.
Yes. Yeah.
There's
We
nothing that
won't.
is alluring at all to me about being thought of as a poet.
Yeah.
So we're just different strokes for different folks. I am called to
Absolutely.
something very different than what you're called to, and that's okay.
Yeah. Well, we're called to teach. I don't know how many people have looked at me and said, I could never do that. And I think this is the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. But if you, again, going back to the Bible, the Lord says, my yoke is easy, the burden is light. The yoke that he places on us, the calling he has given us, is what we do. I am the world's worst salesperson. Cold call. Hey, give me $10,000 to invest. No, okay, fine. I mean, I'm just terrible at it, and it would cause me stress. This brings life, and I think that's when you're doing what you are called to do as a leader.
Yep.
It's going to generate life in you. You're not going to be faking it. You're not going to be saying, well, I read this article that said I should be like this, and it's just totally the opposite of who I am. Therefore, but I'm going to try it. When you get comfortable, that's when you can really become the best of who you are. And
Yeah, and when you appreciate that other
young.
people don't have to be you.
Yeah.
Like when I hit that revelation, like other people don't think like me, nor do they have to be like me. Wow, that was game changing, right?
Yeah.
The scripture talks about train up a child in the way it should go and it will not depart from it, right? Now, what that actually means literally is according to his bent.
That's good.
If I want, so when I deal with Gracie, I deal with Gracie differently than I deal with Ian because they're different. Gracie wants to have that like let's go, let's have this art.
Yeah.
Ian's not like that. He operates differently. So I have to deal with each one of them differently based on how they're according to the way that they're kind of already designed, gifted, the way that they think things are interesting or not interesting. And so we're sensitive to that as we're homeschooling. We're sensitive to like, this one might need to be doing more of that, and this one might be doing more of that. And so when you get that, it changes everything. And you should be doing that with any area of leadership. You're dealing with individuals. Like the big push in society is equality, equality, equality. No, treat people differently based on who they are. That's the way that you should be dealing with them, not the same cookie cutter, same exact thing for everybody for some weird sense of equality. So,
Yeah. Agreed. Awesome.
okay. So I have, was that the end of that lesson?
That was it. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to spring something on you now. And that is, you're talking about being 62. You've been teaching since when?
1982.
Okay, so that's a good long while to be learning about leadership. I want to hear about what is the overarching leadership lesson that comes from your time teaching since 1982. Like, what have you taken away from it? I'm going to give you time to think about it because I'm going to give my own example.
Okay.
Like I said, I learned that valuable lesson from you about, you're teaching students, not teaching a subject. And there's this great quote by Maya Angelou where, I think I spend all this time preparing, getting my stuff. I'm like, I really do. Like, I'm way nerdy and spend way more time preparing than they're going to spend reading it themselves or learning it themselves. Right. But it's not about the subject matter as much as it is something else. And she said this, Maya Angelou said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Isn't that a great quote?
Oh, that's it.
And I think, when people reflect back on the time that they spent in my class or your class, they're going to be thinking about that. They're not going to be thinking, when you taught that lesson about the Constitution, Article 5, and right, they're not going to be thinking that at all. They're going to be thinking about how, whether I helped them grow, whether I helped them develop, whether I was listening, whether I cared, even if I did it imperfectly. I could drop the ball, but if I care, and like if you care, and you could say two people say the exact same thing, and the person that they know has their back, is in their corner and cares, says the same thing that somebody that doesn't, and that second person, he's just discounted. I don't care what he says. I'm not going to
Right.
listen to that. It's a
Yes.
phenomenal thing. It's like you react to people based on your context.
Yeah.
So again, that quote was, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Okay, so that's my big takeaway here, is that teaching is not just about the subject matter, it's about people. Okay,
It is.
your go.
So I have a feeling this is going to be one of those answers I give you that after we're done, I'm going to go, oh, I should have said this, and I should. But I think the lesson I've learned as a leader is that you always show respect.
Yeah.
I remember hearing teachers when I was a young teacher, and over time, I need to earn their respect, or I'm going to command their respect. And I've often said, if you respect the students in your class, they will have no choice but to show you respect, because you reap what you sow. But it doesn't matter whether they slow my class down. They're the best students in the class. They're annoyed. You handle them with respect. And there's another lesson that's popping up, and I'm going to give Casey Griffin, who we both knew, this lesson. When people are upset, they're usually not personally upset with you. And if they are, just let them unpack their suitcase.
Mm-hmm.
And as they just unpack the suitcase, tell you what's going on, you're going to hear the real issue. And if you do not take personal offense, then you can meet their need. And I'm going to swerve into maybe a third part of this. I get to mentor boys. At StoneBridge School, we mentor. Last year, one of my seniors who graduated, we give a speech, as you know, at our retreat. The seniors get to talk. And he brought up the fact in his speech. He said, Mr. Carlucci says this all the time, and he told me in ninth grade, and it changed the way I think. And it's changed the way I think. You can choose to be offended, or you can choose not to be offended.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
As a leader, choosing not to be offended. The guy cuts you off on the highway. Don't think, oh, what a jerk. Think, oh my, he must be on the way to the hospital because something's happened. I mean, I know I'm making that up, but it makes your life so much better, and it makes you a great leader because you can do what we said earlier. You can listen. So I rambled through it. If I were to tie a bow on it, get yourself out of the way as you lead, your personal pride and who, I deserve this respect, and just show respect, kindness, and choose not to be offended. And then you're teaching everybody around you how to do that. So if that is a decent answer. If not,
that's excellent. You get an A.
Yeah. All right.
So I just want to give props to Casey. As you know, Nicole worked for Casey, and to this day we talk about what an excellent leader she was. I mean, like, she just led so smoothly, so humanely. So she just did such a great job. I can't say enough good things about how she was as a leader. When you talked about respect, it's reciprocal. What you give is what you get. And if you give respect, you get respect. But it works with other things too. It works with trust. If I'm distrusting of you, you're distrusting of me. If I'm trusting of you, you tend to trust me. It works with love. If you love your students, and that's what a lot of leadership is. It's just love, right? If you just simply love them, if you love them, guess what? They tend to return that. So it's what you give out is what you get, and that's just a very important principle. Okay, so I am to the point where I get to the end of whatever, and I selected a quotation for contemplation, and I do this ahead of time, not knowing exactly what we're going to talk about, but we knew we were talking about British lit, and so I have a Milton quote.
Oh,
Okay.
good.
And this works out really well with StoneBridge. Now, StoneBridge was very interested in character and self-governance and that kind of thing. He said this: "He who reigns within himself and rules passions, desires, and fears is more than a king." Yeah,
Wow, that's awesome.
good stuff, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And you know what? There's something very right about that. If you control yourself, everything else can go well. If you can't control yourself, you're not going to get very far as a leader. You're going to inflict some kind of damage somewhere along the way that's going to undercut your ability to lead. So
Yeah,
again, the quote was, "He who reigns within himself and rules passions, desires, and fears is more than a king."
great.
So there we are.
There we go.
Okay, I'm going to give you the last word. Anything else that you want to say about anything that we talked about today?
I think I've already said it. I just want to restate, we're always leading, and
Mhm.
we lead in various areas. You lead your children, you lead other people. You may even be leading the person in the grocery store line in the way that you behave. So never, we don't get to, and maybe as followers of Christ, I think this, we don't get to compartmentalize and act like a fool because we just want to. We just don't.
Yeah.
You have to, because those every moment you can impact somebody's life.
That's a great thought. Hey, Jeff, thank you for coming back on the podcast, and we really appreciate it. If you're listening to this and you want to hear more with Jeff and I, we've talked about a number of other topics, from family life to other things about how to lead in academic or educational environment. So you can go back through the catalog and listen to that. I'll post those links to those earlier episodes below, so if anybody's interested. Thanks a bunch, man. I'll talk to you later.
All right, Darren, thank you so much. It's so good to see you. Look forward to talking to you again.
You too.